Before the story begins, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so this channel can keep growing and bring you even more compelling stories. My name is Mara. 3 months ago, my mother called me at 10:14 on a Thursday night and said, "We need you home tomorrow." She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was busy. She just said my father's blood pressure was high, Daniel was overwhelmed, and the house was in trouble. I stood in my Denver kitchen, staring at my silent coffee maker, and I knew before she said the number, they were not calling their daughter. They were calling their backup plan. The next morning, I flew to Philadelphia with one carry-on and one folder in my bag. The folder was not full of bank statements, though my mother probably hoped it was. It was not a cashier's check. It was not a rescue plan written by a woman who had panicked overnight and decided to save everyone again. It was a boundary. When I pulled up to my childhood home, the porch light was still on, even though it was noon. That small detail bothered me more than it should have. My parents used to yell at me for leaving one lamp on when I was a teenager because electricity cost money. But now the porch light burned in the middle of the day, while the family inside waited for me to fix a problem they had been ignoring for years. My father, Martin, opened the door before I knocked. His face looked tired, but not humbled. "There is a difference." "Mara," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Thank God." I stepped inside. The dining room table was covered with envelopes, loan notices, credit card statements, and yellow sticky notes. My mother, Elaine, sat at the far end with a mug of tea she had not touched. My older brother, Daniel, leaned against the wall with his arms folded. His wife, Kira, sat beside him, tapping her nails against her phone. Nobody smiled. My mother reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, we're so grateful you came." I looked at the table. "How bad is it?" Daniel sighed, like my question was already annoying him. "We're not here to do a whole investigation." I turned to him. "Then why am I here?" The room went still. My father rubbed his forehead. "We need $186,000. I nodded once. Not because it was a small number. It wasn't. I nodded because a part of me had already expected it. "What is the plan?" I asked. My mother blinked. "The plan? Yes. What changes after the money is paid?" Daniel pushed himself off the wall. "The house gets saved. Dad stops stressing. Mom stops crying. That's the plan." I looked at him for a long second. "That is the outcome you want." "It is not a plan." Kira made a small sound under her breath. My father's jaw tightened. "Mara, this is not a business meeting. This is family." I set my carry-on by the chair and sat down. "That is exactly why I'm asking." My mother's eyes filled fast. They always did when a conversation moved somewhere she did not want to go. "We did not call you here to be judged." "I'm not judging you," I said. "I'm trying to understand how you got here and how you plan to not get here again." Daniel laughed once. "You live alone in a condo and write software all day. You don't understand what real pressure is." There it was. The old line, dressed in new clothes. I was single, so my money was extra. I had no children, so my time was open. I had no husband, so my needs were smaller. I had built a stable life, so everyone acted like it had built itself. I looked at my brother. "I understand pressure very well. I just stopped announcing mine." My mother whispered, "Please don't start." But it had already started. It had started long before that morning. It started when I was 8 and Daniel got a new bike for his birthday, while I got a sketchbook from the clearance aisle because, as my father said, Mara doesn't need much to be happy. It started when I was 12 and my mother missed my school play because Daniel had a baseball banquet, even though he had spent most of the season on the bench. When I came home in my costume, she said, "You understand, don't you? Your brother needed us there." I did understand. That was the problem. I understood so often that understanding became my job. When Daniel failed algebra, my parents hired a tutor. When I brought home straight A's, they said, "See? This is why we don't worry about you." When Daniel crashed my mother's car at 17, they called it a mistake. When I asked for help with college applications, my father slid a stack of forms across the counter and said, "You're smart enough to figure it out." By the time I left for college, I had learned how to pack boxes without crying. I had learned how to work 2 campus jobs. I had learned how to eat cheap noodles in my dorm room while my parents mailed Daniel gas money because he was going through a phase. The funny thing about being the child who never needs anything is that people start believing you have no needs at all. For years, I played the part well. I remembered birthdays. I sent money quietly when the property tax bill was late. I covered Daniel's car insurance one winter because my mother said he was embarrassed and she didn't want him to feel like a failure. I flew home when Dad had surgery, cooked meals, cleaned the fridge, changed sheets, and went back to work without telling anyone I had used the last of my vacation days. No one called that sacrifice. They called it Mara being Mara. And maybe I would have stayed in that role forever if not for one dinner. It happened 6 months before the phone call. We were all at a restaurant for my father's retirement dinner. Daniel arrived late with Kira and their 2 children. Everyone acted like his entrance was the start of the evening, even though I had been there for 40 minutes helping my mother arrange the cake. Near the end of dinner, Daniel mentioned that he wanted to move his family into a bigger house. My mother touched his arm and said, "Of course. You have a family. You need room." Then she turned to me, smiling like she was saying something gentle. "Mara, you're lucky. You only have yourself to think about." I stared at her. My father nodded. "That's true. Daniel's responsibilities come first now. You've always been the easy one." I asked, very quietly, "So where do I come?" Daniel smirked into his drink. "Come on, don't make it dramatic." But my mother answered. "Oh, honey," she said, "you know what we mean. Daniel has people depending on him. You're fine. You're fine." 2 words that had followed me my whole life. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I just folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and said, "Good to know." Nobody noticed the change in me that night. That is the thing about loyalty ending. It does not always slam a door. Sometimes it just stands up quietly, pays its share of the bill, and stops volunteering to bleed. After that dinner, I changed small things. I removed my name from the family emergency credit card. I stopped paying bills that arrived in my inbox with no explanation. I let calls go to voicemail. When my mother texted, "Can you handle this real quick?" I replied, "I need details first." At first, they acted confused, then annoyed, then hurt. But underneath all of it, I felt something I had not felt in years. Space. So when I sat at that dining room table, looking at $186,000 of chaos, I was not the same daughter they had trained. My father leaned back in his chair. "Mara, we know you have the money." "I have savings," I said. "That is not the same as money available for other people's emergencies." Daniel scoffed. "Other people? We're your family." "Yes," I said. And for years, that word has meant I give and everyone else explains why they need more. My mother covered her mouth. "That's unfair." I opened the folder and slid the first page across the table. "This is what I'm willing to do." Daniel stepped forward. "What is that?" "A loan agreement." The word hit the room like glass breaking. My father stared at the page. "A loan?" "Yes. You want your parents to sign a loan agreement?" "I want adults who need $186,000 to be clear about what happens next." Kira finally looked up from her phone. "That feels a little extreme." I turned to her. "So does asking one person to risk her financial future because everyone else avoided reality." No one answered. I continued, keeping my voice calm because I knew if I sounded angry, they would make my tone the issue and ignore the truth. There will be no cash transfer to personal accounts. Any payment goes directly to the lender, the tax office, or the mortgage company. The second car gets sold. The club membership gets canceled. Daniel and Kira contribute a fixed amount every month. Mom and Dad meet with a financial counselor. We all attend family therapy for at least 12 sessions. Daniel's face went red. "Family therapy? Are you kidding me?" "No. We need money, not a group feelings session." I looked at him. "You need money because this family has a feelings problem it keeps disguising as a money problem." My mother started crying then, but this time I did not rush to soften what I had said. That was new for me. My father picked up the agreement and flipped through the pages. "This is cold." "No," I said. Cold would be letting you lose the house to prove a point. This is structured help. Daniel pointed at me. You just want control. I want accountability. You want to punish us because you're bitter. I took a breath. I am not bitter because you needed help. I am hurt because you only remembered I was family when my bank account became useful. The room went quiet again. That silence was different. It did not feel empty. It felt like truth had finally taken up space. My mother wiped her cheeks. We never meant to make you feel used. I believe you, I said. But intention does not erase impact. She looked down. I said, an apology without change is just a request for me to stay quiet. I'm not doing that anymore. My father stared at the papers. This is how strangers treat each other. No, I said. Strangers ask for less. Daniel shook his head. Unbelievable. I looked at him. What is unbelievable is that you are almost 40 and still think my life exists to cushion yours. He stepped back like I had slapped him. Maybe I had, with words. Kira said softly, Daniel, maybe we should read it. He turned on her. You're taking her side? I'm taking the side of not losing the house, she said. For the first time that day, Daniel had no quick answer. My father lowered the papers and looked at me with something close to anger, but also something else. Fear, maybe. Not fear of poverty. Fear that the old order of the family was breaking. So what? He asked. We sign this, or you walk away. I shook my head. No. You sign this, and I help in a way that does not destroy me. You refuse, and I still love you, but I do not fund the same pattern. My mother whispered, how can you say you love us and put conditions on it? I looked at her, and for the first time I saw how deeply she believed love meant rescue. Maybe no one had taught her anything else. Because love without conditions is not the same as money without conditions, I said. My love is not the loan. My future is. She closed her eyes. I stood. You have until tomorrow evening. Daniel laughed again, but it was weaker this time. That's it? 24 hours. Yes, my father said, and if we need more time? You have had years of time. I'm giving you 1 day of clarity. I picked up my bag. At the doorway, my mother called after me. Mara, when did you become so hard? I turned around. I didn't, I said. I became honest. Then I left. I spent that night in a hotel 10 minutes away from the house where I grew up. I could have stayed in my old room, but my old room had become a storage space for Daniel's holiday decorations and broken exercise equipment. That felt too fitting. I ordered soup from the hotel restaurant and sat on the bed with the television muted. My phone buzzed 14 times. Mom, please call me. Dad, this is hurting your mother. Daniel, you've made your point. Kira, I'm sorry. I'm reading it. That last message stayed with me. I did not reply right away. Instead, I thought about every version of myself who would have caved by then. The college girl who mailed $50 home even when she needed textbooks. The 26-year-old who paid Daniel's overdue electric bill and pretended it was no big deal. The 32-year-old who smiled through that retirement dinner and let the words, "You're fine," land in her chest like a stone. I wanted to tell those versions of me that we were done. Not done loving. Done disappearing. The next evening, I returned to the house at 6. The porch light was off. It was a small thing, but I noticed. My mother opened the door. Her face was pale. My father was at the dining room table. Daniel sat beside Kira, his arms crossed again, but the anger in him looked tired now. The folder was open. My father said, "We read it." I sat down. And? Daniel looked away. Kira spoke first. "We can sell the second car. It's not necessary. And the membership too." My mother said, "I called the financial counselor this morning. They can see us next week." I looked at my father. He cleared his throat. "I don't like the therapy part." "I know. But," he looked at the papers. "Maybe we need it." My mother started crying again, but this time she said something I had waited years to hear. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Not just for this. For making you carry what we did not want to face." Daniel stared at the table. I looked at him. "And you?" He swallowed. "I don't know how to say this without sounding awful." "Try." He rubbed his hands together. "I think I got used to you being the answer. I didn't think about what it cost you. That was not a perfect apology. But it was the first sentence from him that did not try to make me smaller. So I nodded. We signed the agreement that night. I did not feel victorious. That surprised me. I had imagined that if my family finally admitted the truth, I would feel powerful. Instead, I felt tired. Cleanly tired, like after carrying something heavy and finally putting it down. The weeks after that were not magical. Daniel complained when the second car sold for less than he wanted. My father got angry after the first therapy session and said the therapist was digging up old nonsense. My mother tried twice to ask me to just cover a small bill outside the agreement, and both times I said, send it to the financial counselor. The first time I said that, my hands shook after the call. The second time, they didn't. Change did not arrive like a sunrise. It arrived like work. Messy, slow, inconvenient work. But something shifted. My parents began sending me updates instead of emergencies. Daniel started making payments, small at first, then steady. Kira texted me once to say, I don't think anyone understood how much you were holding. I read that message 3 times. Therapy was awkward. My father hated silence. My mother cried whenever the therapist asked what she expected from me as a child. Daniel made jokes until the therapist asked who he was trying to protect with humor. Then one session, my father said, we praised Mara for being easy because it made our lives easier. Nobody spoke after that. Not even me. Because sometimes the truth does not need a response. It just needs to be heard. 2 months later, I flew back to Denver and walked into my apartment after midnight. The city lights were bright beyond the windows. My suitcase stood by the door. My plants needed water. My fridge was almost empty. For once, those ordinary problems felt beautiful. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee. Mom. My body tensed out of habit. Then I answered. She said, Hi, honey. I just wanted to ask how your flight was. I waited for the rest. There was no rest. No bill. No crisis. No careful warm-up before a request. Just a question. It was fine, I said, and my voice came out softer than I expected. She asked about my week. I told her. She listened. Not perfectly. Not like a movie. But she listened. When we hung up, I stood there in my kitchen for a long time, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold. I realized the phone had become just a phone again. Not a siren. Not a summons. Not proof that love was about to cost me something. Just a phone. I still help my family, but I do not rescue them from every consequence. I still love them, but I no longer confuse love with access to everything I built. I still answer when they call, but I answer as Mara, not as the family's emergency fund. And if there is one thing I learned, it is this. Boundaries do not end love. They end the version of love that requires one person to disappear so everyone else can stay comfortable. For the first time in my life, I was not waiting for my family to make room for me. I made room for myself. And somehow, that became the beginning of a better family.